words above parts of the walls, and it's just characterful. Hello, welcome to the celebration of 200 subscribers. Thank you for coming, and I threw out an invitation for questions from me to you, for you to bring through to me, and together we're going to look at those now. Here are your comments to my questions about what you're reading, poem you would like, things you like making, things you find less time to make, and a work of art that just blew you away and you enjoy it so much. Let's have a look at the answers. Christopher Dawn has given a really good reply. Here's what he's saying: that he's just started rereading Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. The last time I read it was 30 years ago and I loved it then. That's a great thing when you find a book that can last that length of time and you still enjoy it. Roy Reads Anything, brilliant, has given me a really good question about my poetry. Got to get back to that. Roy Reads Anything is currently reading Twelfth Night. He might have finished because we're currently coming up to Twelfth Night, if not past it already, on the 6th of January. And he recommends the poem Often I Am Permitted to Return to a Meadow by Robert Duncan. And he likes to make walks and writing of walks, which is a great thing. Those things go together. I mean, Virginia Woolf, for example, loved that. She walked great distances as a way of walking through, thinking about what she was writing and taking time for that. Kay Breen brought in some very good answers. She said current read is The Dream of the Red Chamber by a Chinese author whose name I can't pronounce. Her poem was on Seeing the Elgin Marbles, John Keats, very classic. Hobby, writing poetry, fabulous, love that. I'm going to try and do more poetry in this year, reading it out occasionally. Maybe a little video would pop up, just me reading a poem with a couple of thoughts on it. And of course you can always end the tape early and just listen to the poem. You don't have to listen to my thoughts on it, but that might prompt something else for you. I also recommended for her and anybody else watching this who likes poetry that I did a review of many of the poetry books I have, and it's there as my library tour shelf number 3. You might find something you enjoy. I had a really good conversation with Percy Does Everything, so thank you for taking part. I was pointing out that she has currently got 300 viewers, and she just clocked over at the time when I was looking at her website. She'd got to 301, so I'm encouraging her to do something to celebrate, and I hope she will be doing that shortly. Now for the questions you've asked me. Christopher Dunn asked, are there things in the city or countryside that you enjoy visiting? And have you read anything that has had you in tears of laughter? Some of my favourite scenery are seasides, and I particularly like many that are in the Highlands of Scotland, and I knew them with my kids growing up and taking them there, and they're quite unspoilt and there's not many people, and I love them deeply. So I would say that that's particularly helpful to me, and I love being by the sea. One time I went to stay at a friend's house which happened to be by the seaside, and she made it available to us as a little holiday place, and I took a little portable chair, sat down at the sea, and I suddenly found myself going and it was like I needed it. I needed that movement, that feeling, that space, and I didn't realise that until I physically sat down. So sea brings me joy, seaside brings me joy. Have you read anything that has had you in tears of laughter? How long do you have to listen, Christopher? I did a whole video about my 5 favourite light fiction novels, so you'll find lots of clues there. And I've now got some books I've dug out to show you. Cool Comfort Farm, loved. So funny. Stella Gibbons. And it's taking off the whole idea of the Gothic novel where everything is menacing and so forth, and I find that extremely funny. Also, like Milligan, of course, Raccoon, and I think I'm again treading back over familiar territory. If you've seen some of my videos and what makes me laugh, it's funny, quite scatological but funny. And of course P.G. Woodhouse, which is almost synonymous with me and my videos on YouTube, and particularly this one, A Joy in the Morning, which he wrote during the war at a time when there was very little to laugh about, and some of the scenarios are the most ludicrously wonderful setups and just amazing little twists and turns to the plot. So I love that. and everything around me sliding off my desk. Excuse the noises. It's a bit like an eruption or something, but we soldier on. And the Oxford Book of Humour's Prose, which is on my very first video I made for YouTube, because I bought it in a sale. I bought a duplicate because the book itself is so amazing, and I've enjoyed it so much because it's a troll through all the humorous things to do that are written in English for several hundred years. If you're going to have one book that's going to make you probably laugh, then this is the one to get. It really is superb. But your reading list and your TBR list will never be the same again, because you're going to have hundreds of authors that you've discovered and enjoyed. And I think there's one here by Arthur Conan Doyle, which is about a French army soldier who is writing, looking at things that are very British and getting it all wrong, getting the wrong end of the stick, so to speak. But for sheer amazingness, there are stories from Australia which are just the best. And Alan Marshall, I enjoyed him. He talked about a particular mythical sheep station known as the Spiwa. Now, I cannot do the accent, unfortunately, but they are such tall tales. They just made me scream with laughter almost. Plus, there's also the sense that they're not familiar to me because they're Australian stories, so they're fresh. And here's just a couple of sentences. They were tough men in the Spiwa. Firstly, there's Crooked Mick, who tried to strangle himself with his own beard in the big drought. He was a gun shearer. 500 a day was nothing to him. Once the boss, annoyed because of Crooked Mick's rough handling of some wethers, strode up to him on the board and barked, "You're fired." Crooked Mick was shearing flat out at the time. He was going so fast that he shore 15 sheep before he could straighten up and hang his shears on the hook. And so it goes on like that. And that appealed to me. But honestly, total treasure trove. One book you could buy, laugh through, and have indications of books and authors that you can enjoy for humour for the rest of your life, basically. I've had that book probably about 15, 20 years, and it's just a constant source of delight. And Read and Laugh Out Loud, Map and Lucia, this year, I read them. They tend to circle about because they're classic British humour, and they quite often have television series, but the books themselves are wonders of letting you know what the different characters are thinking and feeling, and all the plotting in little pleasant English villages where people want to be on the committees and seem to be making the big decisions for the neighbourhood. And I totally recommend those. Again, I think you'll find those referred to in my videos. I'm always dragging humour onto the scene. Right, let's see, what else have we got? Roy Reads Anything. He's asking, is any of your poetry available to read anywhere? Yes, it's actually available to hear more than anything else. I appear in this book, mythologized in Learning to Love. I've got Prost poetry collection curated by Chris Cohen. I've just got 2 poems in it, and I'm not sure they're really typical of my writing now because they're quite a while ago. And then there was a follow-up anthology which I have yet to get a copy of, and I also had some poems in that as well. But this is the main place at the moment. Beginnings. It's a little self-published book of poetry which I sold a couple of years ago, and so just quick flick through. And it was made in conjunction with an artist friend who had made some pictures to do with coming up to Christmas and Advent, and I pulled together some poems which were from and about Advent, and together we made them into little short videos and ran them up at Christmas one year. They're roughly about a minute each, and so you have her picture and then some poems, occasionally Jacqueline's own poems. So you'll find them on her site, www.jacquelinestewart.com. I'll put the wee thing here. They are Christmassy, so you might not be in the mood for them. But since I'm going to be reading some poems this year, I might well throw in some of my own now and then, just to let people hear. And obviously I will want to be writing more, bringing more out. And I have an exhibition coming up in the springtime, and so I need to write more poems, collect together more poems, and pull that together because I want the exhibition to be across the disciplines and available with an audio guide of poems. So that's watch this space in a way. I will bring more. One, I'll just read a little poem which I love. It's not even calling it a poem. It's more like a little one of those very short Japanese type poems. So it's only a few lines. Winter. The trees are hallelujah jazz hands pointing to the sky. And I wrote that because one day I just saw trees like hands in the bleakness of winter. And here's another one. Fast food. On the train, slumped asleep, leaning against the view, her open mouth swallows farms, scarecrows, power lines, cars, hedges, hills at 48 miles per hour. Short, funny ones. So thank you for asking the question, Roy Reads Anything. Now, questions from author Lauren Adele. How do you choose which book to read, and what's a book you always recommend? And she says hers is Phantom by Susan Kay. How do I choose which book to read? I think it's instinctive. There is the thrill of the chase, we all know. We go into a second-hand bookshop or even bricks and mortar, and you actually have able to look at the books, see them, feel them, carry the weight, look at how many pictures there are, get a sense of the words, flick open a few pages, and I love doing that. I love the looking. I think it's tremendous. I don't do it very often because once I have looked, I may bond with the book and it might be hard to take it out of my little hands. But I love that serendipity where you find a book and it's not one you've gone looking for. So I do enjoy that. I keep a list of books I would like to buy and read at some point, but at this point it's almost ineffective. It's hundreds and hundreds of books. When I meet friends, I tend to say, what are you reading? I genuinely do. And I obviously listening to BookTube increases the books I hear about that are good. And that's key. I will not waste time with a book which is not giving anything to me. I think the BBC got it right when they said their aims were to educate, inform or entertain. And I think books should do that. They should promise that they're going to tell you something or tell you a story and be entertaining about it. And then that covers fiction, non-fiction. It should give you something. What's a book I always recommend? Well, I think there is no getting past the book on creativity, which I always recommend, which goes into the stories of women who have been creative and how and why and how they find the time to be creative. I think that's endlessly fascinating. And the other book I always recommend, especially for creatives, is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, because it's the best workbook for getting your creative juices going and so forth. Now, another lovely bookish question has come from Heather Gout. Would love to know your top 5 bookshop recommendations in Edinburgh further afield. Well, a bookshop can't be worth a pilgrimage, a journey just to see and be. My number 1 bookshop is the Aberfeldy Watermill, and that deserves to be said with wonder. Aberfeldy Watermill. And it's a lovely old building. It's in Scotland, and it's kind of like my dream place because the bottom floor is a really cosy cafe which encourages you to loiter. I think it's got a wee stove as well. It's got sort of bashed up settees and comfiness and a really nice menu. And then the next floor is a bookshop. Very small, beautifully curated. And when I mean beautifully curated, I mean that when you start to look at the books, you realise you could almost take everyone, buy everyone, because they're all great examples of their genre, their time. And then the next floor up is an art space. And then next door they have a shop which is selling home things, but interesting nicky-nacky new characterful things called Homer. So they've basically got all my vices together in one place, and I could spend days there. It just tempts me to loiter, and think the day I was there, it was a Sunday, and there were people reading Sunday papers in the city by the log fire, which is just ideal. Now, when you look at their website, I discover that they won lots of awards. I knew they won the award for being one of the best bookshops in the UK, because I actually worked for a while in another bookshop, and one of the staff who came had formerly lived and worked in it, and she was just like, yeah, we won the award for the best bookshop in the UK. But let me just check their website, because they won awards way beyond that. Here we go. The New Yorker book of 75 greatest bookstores in the world. Well, I mean, where else are you going to go from there? It's a beautiful location if you go, and it is worth a trip. It's a very small bookshop now, but every book, as I say, is delightful and they're beautifully displayed. They're based in an area which has gorgeous trees in autumn. If you go in autumn, it's glorious, absolutely glorious. Let's see, on the website it also says the bookshop and cafe in 2022 featured in National Geographic's top 7 UK bookshops and cafes. And there's a little link you can click and read the article. It doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me. So it's number 1, high up, thoroughly recommended. Next would be a second-hand bookshop in Inverness, also in Scotland, in the Highlands of Scotland, Leakey's. It is well known. It is beautiful. It's got so many books. They're all put in properly in sections so you can actually browse. They used to have a cafe, which was just brilliant. Did amazing homemade soups and beautiful bakes. And unfortunately they closed it, so that means there's a chance of getting out after about an hour instead of staying for 2 and going and sustaining yourself with the coffee and a sandwich and going back for more. And in the middle of the store they have got this large log fire, I'm not putting this very well, a stove burning logs, and they have the logs piled around. I have no clue how they got any fire insurance in the middle of a room, an old room, and it's an old building which used to be the church hall, which was ancient and full of open wood floors. But what a place to browse. It's just brilliant. I think it's one of the largest bookshops in the UK, second-hand bookshops in the UK, certainly in Scotland, and it is characterful and well worth a visit. Third, Waterstones, Edinburgh, because it has a brilliant view of the castle if you go and get the right seating on the coffee area, but also because it's got about 5 floors of books. And I remember one of the first times I visited, they had this sign that sort of explained what was on each floor, and they had made it like a chalkboard. And when I looked at it, I just went, I can never read all these books, even if I lived another 300 years and started and did nothing else every day. I couldn't read all the books in this store. What a great resource. Number 4, a bookshop I have not been to, but I've seen photographs of and liked. It's in Belfast. It's called No Alibis. It's near the university, and it's got amazing pictures and sort of words above parts of the walls, and it's just characterful. Back again. So as I was saying, the bookshop, one of the bookshops I would love to visit is No Alibis in Belfast, because I hear so much about it as being a characterful place. And finally, my 5th bookshop would be one I have not been to physically, and that is Afield Books, because they do second-hand online books. So when I hear about a book and I think fabulous, and then I see the price and I wince, and it's not a recent book, I'm off to Afield Books to say, what could you do me for this book? Will it be cheaper? So I have some books I've got which are Afield Books, and of course it's especially helpful whenever a book is quite old and you're struggling to find a copy anywhere. So those are my 5 favourite bookshops so far, but I'm always willing to try and look for a nice new to me good bookshop. So thank you very much for turning up. I hope you've heard and seen something of interest, and on we go together. 200 subscribers and counting, and let's see where the conversations take us in the next wee while. All the best to you for now. Speak to you soon again.